Hey guys, and welcome back to the RevRx podcast, where we talk faith, family, and health in real, honest ways that meet you where you are. Today's episode is a challenging one. It's a real one, and it's one you're going to want to listen to. I'm joined by Kameran Thompson Al-Areqi, a certified marriage coach, speaker, and host of the Married and Connected podcast. Kameran has quite a gift. She's helped hundreds of couples, but here's the kicker: with a 97% success rate. And let me tell you, her wisdom comes not from a bunch of books that she's read, but through her real life experience of experiencing heartbreak, experiencing the ups and downs of marriage herself. This conversation is raw and real, guys. We're talking about why marriage is so hard, how your past shows up in your relationships, what it really takes to build a covenant marriage that lasts, and what that means. Here's the thing: whether you're single, married, divorced, or somewhere in between, this episode is going to speak to you. So buckle up, take a deep breath, and let's dive into this episode of Marriage Unplugged with my new friend, Kameran. Kameran, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. What a privilege it is to have you. You're an old friend, and you're one that I'm super excited to talk to because you have been going through some changes, and I can't wait to hear about them. But Kameran, thanks so much for joining us today on the RevRx podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited to have this conversation. It's been a long time coming.
It has. Before we get into a lot about your business and about marriage and all the good things, I'd love to just hear a little bit about you and your story. So if you could just kind of introduce yourself to our audience, help us to get to know you a little better.
Yeah. So I actually spent 15 years as a kindergarten teacher. And the year after COVID and all of the plexiglass dividers and all of the quote unquote fun there, I was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. I had already gotten my certification as a marriage coach at that point, and so went full time then. Knew that I was good at teaching, but it wasn't something that lit me up and just that I was super passionate about. So decided to go this route full time, and I absolutely love it. I've helped over 105 couples in the last 6 years, 97% success rate. So and what that means is, like, the day that they start with me, we set goals. What do you want your marriage to look like, feel like? People looking on the outside, what do they, what legacy do you want to leave? What's the mission for your marriage? All the things. And then the way that I determine their success rate is actually on them. At the end of when they graduate my program in 6 to 7 months, we go through every one of those goals, and I say, have you hit it or have you exceeded it? Have you hit this or exceeded it? And so we go through those. And if they say yes to all of them, then that's a successful coaching situation.
Yeah, can't beat that.
So that's how that's decided. I'm a mom, and I am actually divorced, not by my choosing, did not want it, prayed for 3 years for God to save it. And ultimately my husband still decided to leave, and, we're good friends and we get along, which is sad that we can't stay married. God has a plan, so we're just rolling with it. So I guess, they say those who can't do, they teach. And so I guess that's God's calling for me right now. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of validity in what you teach, because you know what, it's one of those situations where, all right, if you just always had a rosy marriage, nothing's ever gone wrong, you haven't been through divorce, you don't understand what it's like for things to kind of be rough, then you're not going to be a very good teacher about how to have a good marriage.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But having been through a lot of that, to me, gives you more credibility, because you're able to say, look, I've been through this and I fought for it. And yeah, the outcome wasn't what I wanted, but let me tell you a little bit about my journey and how you can apply that to yours. And so I appreciate your transparency with that and kind of leading with that, because I think it's part of your journey and it's part of what makes you unique.
Thanks. Yeah, he came back in October, and we really tried to make it work, and we both got coaching. But the thing about coaching is that if you don't apply what you're learning, you're not actually going to make changes. And so when all you've ever seen growing up is your dad leaving your mom, or your dad thinking that financially providing is okay. By the way, can you hear that? Can you hear my 4-year-old screaming in the background?
I can't, but hey,
Okay.
that's real
Okay.
life, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this child. But no. So the thing is, when that's all you've ever seen, is we repeat the patterns of our parents, whether we like it or not, and we become what we hate. If you hated that your dad yelled, then most likely you're going to be a yeller, or you're going to swing the pendulum one way or the other. Right. And so that's the thing is that's all he had ever seen was abandonment. And, as a man, it meant that you had to financially provide, but there was never any lessons there on emotional provision or anything like that. And then, for me, just clinging to the marriage and having that being a wife be my identity, that was a really big struggle, and something that I've really been working on over the last several months is my identity, not in being a wife or a mother, but in, a woman and a child of God and all the things.
That's really, really important. And it's something I think that's easy for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
We let our roles in life define us.
Absolutely.
And so coming back to that and
Mm-hmm.
realizing that, okay, I can still be a valuable child of God outside of the roles.
Yeah.
That's really, really, to me, to
Mm-hmm.
a lot of our audience. So thanks for
Yeah.
walking through that. And that kind of leads me into one of my questions for you. So,
Okay.
I understand that you were a kindergarten teacher, bless you.
Uh-huh.
My kids are 4, 6, and 8, and my smallest one is starting pre-K this year. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
at our school. I'm like, oh boy, they're probably like, here comes another Potts kid.
That was my favorite part of teaching is
Yeah, seeing
having
the
the siblings, because they're not the same,
uh,
like your 4-year-old is probably so different than your 6-year-old, and then your
definitely,
five, you
yeah.
know what I mean? And so it's like that was always a really fun part for me.
And so you said you were good at it,
Hmm.
but it didn't light you up. And I just kind of, that's not related to marriage, and that's not. But I want to pause there a moment because there's a lot to unpack there.
Hmm.
But kudos to you for being able to differentiate between those two things. Because
Thank you.
for a large part of my life, I've always thought if I'm good at something, I need to be doing it. And what that resulted in was me being a yes man and me saying
People
yes to
pleaser.
everything that came along because I'm good at that, and therefore I can do it, and therefore I should do it. And the situation I found myself in was where I was doing a lot of things that did not light my fire. They did
Hmm.
not light me up. There were things that I
Hmm.
could do and I could do it well, but I started realizing I can't pour from an empty cup.
That's right.
And so, that takes guts, that takes courage to step into something that, I'm stepping away from this steady income that's comfortable, and then I'm going to step out into entrepreneurship and do something that really makes me happy. But kudos
Yeah.
to you, because there's a lesson there for, I think, all of us. And it's just because
Yeah.
you're good at something doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And, as we get into your marriage counseling, kind of what was the impetus to get you towards the counseling side and the coaching side of things? I know you said you had that already before you stepped into the full-time coaching role, but what was it about being a marriage coach that was appealing to you early on?
Yeah. So I actually changed my major 11 times in college. And because I had so many things,
Yeah,
being a dreamer, like there's so many things that are interesting to me. I'm always learning about something random and going down the rabbit hole. And that was how I was in college too. And so I changed my major so many times and didn't know what I wanted to do. And then my dad called and said, listen, your brother is coming up behind you. He's going to be in college too. You've been there for 4.5 years. I'm going to need you to figure out what you're doing and
I
get
love
out.
that.
Let's go.
Yeah,
And so
move
I
along.
was like, fine, like, let's just go with elementary education because that's what I have the most credits in. So that's what I did. And the thing is that I actually got involved in my church with a program that I don't advertise now, but I do coach it. And it's called Unique Life Design. And it is a Christian based, it is very, very heavily in the word, figuring out your life and basing your life on the word program. And so I went through that program, and it's a 6-month program that I did in 2 weekends at our church. And so here's a tool for all of the listeners out there. Okay. So we're going back to the whole, like, there's so many things that I want to do. There's so many things I can do, but is that my calling? Is that what lights me up? Is that what I am on fire for? Okay. So here's your tool. You're going to draw a funnel on a piece of paper. All right. And at the top of that funnel, like within that funnel, you're going to write all the things you can do. You can be a wife. You can be a husband. You can be a parent. You can be, a pastor or a pharmacist or a marine biologist or a stay-at-home parent or whatever the case may be, right? So add all of the things that you think you might want to do, right? And at the bottom of the funnel, and this is where you're going to have to probably talk to God. You're probably going to have to do a lot of self-reflection based on the principles that you live by, based on like looking back at even junior high and high school. What are the things that you were so on fire for? The things that lit you up, that you were constantly, if you had 10, 15, 20 minutes, what were you researching? What were you reading about? Were all of the books that you read about baseball, or were they all about, like, what were you really, really passionate about? Because that's where that starts. Mine was relationships. So I can remember even in high school, we had to do like an end of year term paper, and we got to choose the topic, but we had to go out into our community and interview people and get information that way, as well as through, the internet had just come out. So like, can't not use that. And so
You're
I'm
aging
dating
us, Cameron.
myself here. I am. But like all of these things. And so mine was marriages. What was the secret? So I went out and I interviewed couples who had been married more than 30 years. And I asked questions like, do you believe that there is one person out there for you? Do you believe, like, what's your secret? What's kept you together for as long as you have? Like all of these things. And these were the questions that I asked, and this was what I was on fire for. And then when I got into college, I really enjoyed psychology. And then, so like I'm putting all of these together. And as I'm doing this funnel for myself, I'm realizing that coaching other people, using that teaching element, I may not be teaching kindergartners anymore. Now I'm teaching adults, because even though we are, little people in big bodies, we still need coaching. We
Yep.
still need taught. We still need to understand who we are and why we do the things we do and what lights us on fire and all of these things. And we're still changing. And this is what's important about marriage, is that the person that you married at the very beginning of your marriage is not the person that they are 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. The beauty about marriage is that you get to be married to multiple different people, but it's the same individual.
Yeah.
Because you're always changing, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just figuring out your identity and what you can do all of these things, but what must you do? What is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? What is the thing and even that might change throughout the seasons. So,
I love
seasons
that.
of life.
Super
Thanks.
helpful tool, and I hope that you guys will take that and practice it, because there is something to be said for doing what you love doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're in a situation to where, hey, even within certain careers, there are different paths. When I first got into pharmacy, I thought that only thing there was to do is to work at a CVS or Rite Aid or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing something totally different now, and I love my job, but I hated it for the first 5 years that I was in it.
Yeah.
Because I was doing retail pharmacy, because I thought that was all there was. Life's too short to do something you hate. And
That's
and I appreciate
true.
your leadership there and kind of showing us how we can figure that out. Now I'm interested, going back to that paper that you wrote and you interviewed all these people. Did you kind of reach a conclusion about what's the secret?
Yeah. So here's what the beauty about the town that I grew up in is that there's like 1,500 people. Everybody knows everybody. In our church, the congregation was made up of like 60% or more people that were, already retired, they're raised their kids, all the things. So finding these people was not hard. But what I found really interesting, and have still, interviewed several people. I've got a podcast episode coming out on this exact topic, in a couple of weeks. The beauty about all of this is that every single one of them, none of them said, we had it so easy and it was never, blah, blah, blah. It was things like, well, we grew up in the Depression and we got married. And, I got married when I was 16 and he was 18 or something like that. And we started having babies right away and, all of these things. Like it was hard. It was hard, hard. They've dealt with things, sicknesses and truly living out those vows of, for better or worse, recessions and, all of, losing jobs and hard, hard, hard things. And every single one of them said, we stick together because we're a team. And there are days that that's easier than others. There are days that, I'm really, really wanting to poison his food at dinner and I don't because it's not the right thing to do.
Right.
So,
but I'm tempted.
But I'm tempted. The temptation is there for sure. But it's things like, just really going back to those principles of what they live by. And nope, we made a commitment. And the biggest part of it is we gave our word. We made a vow. And a vow is not just like, it works out fine. If it doesn't, that's fine too.
Sure.
It is a covenant. And they truly lived by that.
So insightful. I feel like we could say the end and people will get something out of this already.
That's the whole goal, right?
Every answer was different. That's so cool. And I can see that because easy, what's the saying? Smooth seas don't make a skilled sailor or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
So it takes those ups and downs to really grow a marriage.
Absolutely.
If you're married for any length of time, it's not just going to be easy. And so that kind of brings me to this question of sorts. Marriage is hard.
It can be.
And you've experienced it. I've experienced it. I think anybody who's married will say that they've experienced it beyond the newlywed stage. Marriage is hard because here's this thing. You're used to doing things your way. And then now you start living with this other person who has opinions and feelings and beliefs that may be different than yours. And you've got to make that work go by the way forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very, very difficult. In your work as a marriage coach, what do you find to be some of the hardest struggles that couples deal with?
Yeah. So,
loaded question.
This is well, it is and it's not. It's every marriage that comes to me, every couple that comes to me and says we're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to really like 4 or 5 things. And the way that I describe this is when you are born, you are given this imaginary suitcase and you carry this suitcase with you for your entire life. And for your entire life, you are stuffing in that suitcase all of your education, all of your experiences, all of your exposures, and your partner is doing the exact same thing. And when you get married, you move into this house and both of you dump your suitcases on the living room floor. And then you spend the rest of your life sorting through, even if you get divorced, you're still sorting through all of these experiences, education, exposures, because you're still adding to them. Your life doesn't stop the day you get married. So you're still having all of these things and you're still adding to these piles. And so you're sorting through these saying, what do we want to put on the shelves for all the people who come to see us to see as well? What do we want to stuff into closets? What do we want to throw out completely? What do we want to alter or change or recycle or repurpose? What do we, what do we want to put on display in our front yard? So you're constantly doing this with your partner. And let's say you do get divorced. Then you, in an angry haste, because let me tell you, divorce will bring out dragons that inside yourself that you did not even know existed.
Right.
And you're grabbing things, stuffing them back into your suitcase and taking them with you on down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the fun part about that is that when you take that suitcase down the road and you open it up again at some point, some of your partner's stuff is going to be in your suitcase too.
Wow. Yeah.
So it doesn't leave you. It doesn't leave you. And this is why the divorce rate is, around 50% and then 64%, 71, 80, like all of that. So it just increases with time. Okay. So now you asked me, what are the things that people struggle with the most? All right. The thing about it is that when couples come to me and they have not had the education and the experience and the exposures that I have, right? They don't have 3 certifications and all of that. So they come to me and they say, this is our problem. But the problem is not the problem. The problem is deeper than the problem. So here's usually the problems, okay? Number 1, your childhood wounds. Your childhood attachment is going to create everything. So if you are a dismissive avoidant, your emotional needs were not met when you were a child. So what's going to happen is then when you get into a relationship, you don't meet the needs of your partner and usually your kids too.
Yeah.
How would you know how to? Your needs weren't met. But we don't remember how that felt for us growing up and what it felt like for our needs not to get met. So we end up just repeating the cycle. So for an anxious attacher, what's going to end up happening is that maybe one parent met your emotional needs, one parent didn't, or maybe a combination of both of them were sometimes meeting your needs, but sometimes not. Okay, so that's basically what's going to happen to you is that you don't ever know. You're hyper aware, you're hyper fixated on body language and tone and, well, why did you look this way? Well, I didn't give you a look. Well, yeah, you did, so now we're off to the races and we're having an argument about that. And then there's fearful avoidant too that they basically run the entire scale of those. Sometimes you're dismissive avoidant, sometimes you're anxious, sometimes it's a combination of both in an hour. Okay. So that's number one. That's the first thing. And if you do not work through those, you cannot have a healthy marriage.
So important.
It's always going to be a struggle. So that's first. The second thing is communication. Human beings, we think we are the best communicators because we know how to talk. And that is not the case. That is not the case at all. Communication, contrary to popular belief, is also about listening. And a lot of times we don't take into consideration that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Amen.
And so that communication is not just what you say, it's also what your partner or anybody else receives. Okay. So we're always filtering it. I know that you had Dr. Andrea Vitz on your podcast a while back. Go back and listen to that episode. I've had her on my podcast as well. She is a gold mine. And so I went through her program through all of this. That was one of the things that I did to improve myself as a coach and as a mom and, all of the things. Absolute gold mine. And what she talks about on there is that when someone is communicating with us, we're also filtering it using those childhood wounds, using those childhood attachments. So the childhood attachments, again, comes right back up. The other thing is it comes down to principles. So over time, if we don't have really strong principles when we get married that we live into every single day, and this is the case, is that you can think that, well, one of my principles is integrity. I always do the right thing. Okay, but what about when that coworker sends a flirty text and you brush it off thinking it's not that big of a deal until it is a big deal, right? And you go back, did you really live by integrity when you should have shut it down the very first time that you thought it was crossing a line versus waiting for it to become what it is? Did, your kids, even your kids, they come to you and they say, they're asking a really hard question and you're like, oh yeah, and you make up some answer to bypass them. Are you really living with integrity? Are you being honest in that case? Because there's a way to give a child like a developmentally appropriate answer without lying. But a lot of us, we're like, stop asking. And so we just throw a fit and lie and move on. So we're not actually living into the principles that we say we are. And unlike a lot of those marriages that I interviewed when I was 18 years old, a lot of people are lacking those principles and lacking the being true to your word because it's so easy now. And this would be the fourth thing, to fall into what is worldly. Well, society says that it's okay to get a divorce. Society says it's not that big of a deal for kids when their parents get a divorce. Society says that this is okay and I can do this. I can drink and I can smoke and I can lie and I can, society says my happiness is more important than my partnership. Society says that my wants are more important than my partner's needs. So we fall into these categories, and what that ends up looking like are things like we don't really know ourselves. And so we don't know what the principles are that we live by. So we start fighting about money, but it's not about money. It's about freedom, or it's about security, or it's about power, or it's about, something like that. It's about, we start fighting over, who did the chores or who's supposed to do the chores. This is a really long answer. who's supposed to do the chores or who didn't pull their weight. I'm always pulling 95% and you're only pulling 5%. What the heck? And it's a lack of perspective. It's selfishness that again, we're putting our needs or our wants above our partner's needs. And so we're not looking at that in the mix of things. And then going to the communication as well. Did you communicate that in a healthy way? Did you go to your partner and say, hey, I'm really struggling right now. I'm really frustrated because I feel like I'm pulling 95% of the weight and you're only pulling 5%. Or did we walk in and be like, you're lazy and you suck and I hate your guts and you never help out? So,
Right.
it's all about what we think we did versus what we're actually doing.
And in both of those situations, you can say you communicated it, but
You sure did.
there's a big difference in those two things,
There's massive difference.
and a massive difference in how those will be received as well. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, you said a mouthful,
It was a mouthful. Yep. It was a mouthful.
but I tell you what, that's gold. That is solid gold.
Thank you.
And I kind of want to unpack that a little bit
Yeah.
with the rest of our time together, because I think you're really onto something. I think a lot of times when we think about marriage, we think about, okay, well, you just learn to live together or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it's so much more complex than that. So
It is.
getting into that wound, okay, I want to start there because that's something that I've really, within the last couple of years, been made aware of in my life. And a lot of the way that we react, a lot of the way that we view the world, and a lot of the way that we get triggered, call it what it is because of what happened to us in childhood. And there's a lot made of this, but there's a lot of truth behind this. So let me start. Let me give you kind of a quick personal example. My wife may ask me just totally innocently, what plans do you have for the kids this weekend? And really what she means is, what plans do you have for the kids this weekend?
Right.
But because I have a wound from earlier in my childhood that made me think I'm not good enough, okay, that could be because of our parents. That could be because of people who influenced us, coaches, different things along the way, whoever it may be. Because I have that wound, I hear that and I receive that as, you're not doing enough with the kids and you need to do something with them this weekend. And so then that triggers me to say, I've been doing X, Y, Z, and I put up armor and I try to say, hey, here's why I'm a good parent. Here's why I'm good enough.
Yeah.
And in reality, she meant nothing to do with that.
Yep.
And that's a little bit of a hypothetical situation, but that's not far-fetched from different conversations we've had over the years. But that's a good way to explain how we filter things through that wound.
Absolutely.
Think about the things that trigger you. A large part of that is because of what you've bought into because of the childhood wound.
Absolutely.
And then that brings up communication, right? So like you gave a perfect example of two different ways we can communicate the same truth. Hey, I feel like I'm giving more than you are. Let's talk about this. Let's figure this out. Or, you're awful. I want out. I do all the work. You do none. Which way is that? Which one of those is going to be better received? And so, as a pastor, I do counseling too with, and it's maybe different perspective, but a lot of times there is that communication factor. Like you said, we think we're good at communicating because we talk.
Yep.
And I will say, I think men are probably worse at this than women.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
But I'm of course I'm a man, so I'm kind of maybe hard on myself. But I know that in our relationship, and it goes both ways. How you say something is more important than what you say, or
Absolutely.
just as important at least. And then going through that perspective and going through that, the values and the principles that you live by. You're so right. There is this temptation to just say, well, the world says this, and I'm going to live by that. And and I'm not telling you, if you're listening to this and you're not a believer, you're not a Christian, I'm not preaching to you. But if you profess Christ, if you follow the Lord, and if you want to have a godly marriage, then you can't live according to the world. You can't see marriage according to worldly values. And what's sad about this, you gave statistics about the first marriage is about 50% divorce rate, then second, third, fourth, all the subsequent ones are more. Which, number one, tells us that the problem's not the other person a lot of times, right? No, in your situation, that might have been the case. But what that tells us is that if the first marriage ends in divorce 50% of the time, the second marriage ends in divorce 60-something% of the time, at some point we've got to point the fingers back and say, all right, well, maybe getting a new spouse isn't fixing my problem. And so when we think about those numbers, the numbers aren't much different in the church, are they?
Yeah, that's true. That's
true.
So
that tells us right there, I think we're letting the world creep into our marriages and tell us what's okay and what's not okay. And you use the word covenant, and I love that. Right now I'm teaching our young adults about covenant, and it has opened my eyes to so many different things. But marriage is the closest thing we have to a covenant today. And even the thing about the feeding each other cake at the wedding, that goes all the way back to these treaties and these covenants that were made in the ancient Near East. And they would have a meal with their covenant, and they would feed each other the first bite of that meal. But it's a sacred covenant.
it is.
And when you enter into this and you make a vow, with God as our witness, then that means a whole lot more. So it's not just some contract we draw up to where there's these out clauses and as long as I feel like it, I'm going to stay married. But if they ever start doing X, Y, Z, then I'm out. I think that matters a whole lot. So I love unpacking what you said, and then kind of thinking along the lines too of what's your perspective on a lot of it. Just seems like marriage doesn't mean as much as it used to. That's a blanket statement, but maybe you can unpack that for us. What's your perspective on that as a coach?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I kind of want to go back to what you were talking about of the marriage and even feeding each other the cake. The issue starts with the wedding itself. And it starts with the fact that people will spend thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on weddings.
Yeah.
And it's one day. It is one celebration. And I know for me, when I woke up after my first marriage, I woke up and said, the day after we got married, I said, what am I going to do now? What do I do from here? I've spent all of this time, creating this marriage, creating this wedding. And now I don't know what to do with the marriage. Okay.
Right.
So there's that first. But the second thing is, do you even know what you're saying when you're up there saying your vows? Do you even know?
Good. That's good.
We a lot of times it's well, this is what the marriage is. This is what every every wedding that I've ever witnessed has said. So this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Additionally, okay, let's take it. Well, we didn't say traditional vows. We wrote our own. Okay, cool. But what did you even say in those vows? Does it apply to all circumstances? The reason that the vows are what they are is because from the beginning of time, you can apply the words that are said there, but it doesn't apply if you don't know what you're saying. We live 95% of our lives on autopilot. Okay. So when we're just saying vows to say them, when we're cutting the cake and feeding it to each other and smashing it in each other's faces like immature idiots, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Why are you getting married to this person? We don't reflect. We don't stop and reflect. Okay. Now, let me remember what was your original question that I was going to answer?
No, we don't take marriages seriously. And that kind of plays into it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we don't take marriages seriously. And here's why. Because as human beings are one of the reasons that the marriages that I interviewed when I was 18 years old, this is 20 years ago. The issue is that they didn't have social media. Mm-hmm. They didn't have this was one of the rabbit holes that I went down a couple of weeks ago. We actually weren't supposed to know what's going on the other side of the world. We weren't supposed to know what was happening 3 states away. Mm-hmm. Media has created that. The world has given us that privilege. Okay. Now we have abused that privilege because now that's how we get our dopamine hits instead of having open-ended conversations with our partner.
Wow.
There are statistics that couples who have a TV in their bedroom are I can't remember the number it is, but it is a wild number, that they are wildly more disconnected than those who don't have a TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And it's things like this. So the reason we're not taking it seriously anymore is because of comparison jealousy. Now, there's two types of jealousy. There's romantic comparison, and there's also life comparison. Okay. So when you're looking at your partner being like, why did you talk to her? Well, why are you texting him? Well, why, like things like that? We're jealous of the other person. There's also comparison jealousy, and that comparison jealousy is, I am so jealous of my partner because my partner gets to leave the house. They get to go to a job. They get to my ex was a pilot, so he got to fly around to different cities. And there are a ridiculous number of pilot wives that are jealous of their spouse because I'm home. I'm taking care of the home front. I'm, dealing with the sick kids and the kid that colored all over the couch with a marker or got into the paint and decided to do handprints all over the wall or whatever. Like, I'm dealing with all of the things that go wrong. While you get to sleep all night in a hotel, you get to do all of these things, but I don't get to do those things. While again, perspective, flip that. Okay, yes, I do get to go sleep in a hotel, but you get to experience all of the happy moments with the kids. You get to experience when they take their first steps or when they say something really funny or when they finish the summer reading program for the first time and get to, choose their prize and they're so excited about it. These are the things. So again, always perspective. We're so selfish as a human race that we're only thinking about ourselves. And if your listeners take nothing else away from this podcast, I want them to take away the question that they can ask themselves in every single situation. And that question is, how am I making this about me? When your partner comes to you and they say, you're horrible and you didn't do enough, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you get defensive and you get angry because you're making it about you. Their outburst has nothing to do with you. So instead of thinking about, oh my gosh, they're like yelling at me. Okay, cool. Yeah, they are yelling, but again, that has nothing to do with you. Instead, hear the fear in their voice. Hear the frustration in their voice. The problem is not the problem. The problem is deeper than the problem. So hear the deeper problem there. Forget the fact that they are communicating this in a, ridiculous manner and throwing a tantrum like a 4-year-old. Okay. Right. That's not the problem. The problem is what they're feeling underneath. So when your wife comes to you and she's telling you, and it's like, why are you a nag? Cool. Okay. So she's a nag to you. That's your perspective. But also, what's hers? Why is she a nag? She doesn't wake up every morning and be like, I think I'm going to be a nag today. No, there is a deeper need there. And this is why divorce happens. Because at the end of the day, it's about our core wounds that we have. Our deeper emotional intimacy needs are not being met. One person in that couple, so in my marriage, I'll just use me for an example. In my marriage, my deeper need was for connection and intimacy and open, honest, transparent, presence. His core need, his deeper need, was for independence and freedom and lack of responsibility and being able to just be autonomous and do what he wanted when he wanted. So there's very different needs being met there. But again, it goes back to us not taking us seriously because we don't know ourselves. Yeah. Instead of really getting to know ourselves, we're scrolling on social media. We're getting dopamine hits wherever we can get them, instead of creating that dopamine within ourselves and with our partner and in the word and, all of these things. Like, where is the temporary? This is the other thing that people don't understand. You can check me on this as a preacher, but I'm pretty sure that in Galatians, where it talks about the fruits of the Spirit, happiness is not one of the fruits of the Spirit. Joy is. And there is a very big difference. So for the listeners that don't know that, happiness is fleeting. It is temporary. It is moment to moment. It is for me, my happiness is when I make homemade bread for my family and they absolutely love it coming out of the oven and they're just devouring it. Like, I know that I am feeding my family nutritious, good food, that they're going to remember the smell of the house and they're going to remember that, the taste of that cinnamon swirl bread. Okay. So that's happiness for me. Happiness for me is excuse me, traveling. It's getting to see God's creations. It's getting, like the things like that. But those are momentary dopamine hits. That's not joy. Joy is being grateful and truly enjoying the life that God gave you, no matter what it is, even if it's in the middle of the storm. So my husband is like currently, as we're recording this podcast right now, he is currently packing all of his things to move out. Now, I'm not going to let his choice of leaving our family. I've already tried. I've already had all the conversations with him. I've already told him like that this is selfish and it's not okay and that we can fix this and this is, possible and all the things. And I am choosing not to let his leaving wreck my joy. Because all this means is that God's not done with my story yet.
That's right.
And you can't go through life saying, well, that doesn't make me happy, so I'm going to leave. Well, I can, and that's the issue, is he doesn't think that he is going to be happy because being a family, it requires responsibility. And it's not autonomous. You have to think of other people when you are a spouse. So it's the difference between happiness and joy that we have to know these things. And that comes from knowing ourselves. And again, going back to those principles that we really live by. Do you know what you live by and can you define it?
Preach it, girl. That was so good. And I'm reminded of a couple of things. Number one, it takes two. It takes two to have a marriage.
Absolutely.
And you're living that right now, But I want to remind our listeners out there, it takes two. Mm-hmm. There are times where you can try all you can. And you can't make that other person come alongside. And I think that's a relatable story. So again, thanks for your transparency there. Thanks. Number two.
Yeah.
I do believe 1,000% that one of the reasons why marriages are not taken as seriously and why half of them end in divorce is because we seek marriages as ways to make us happy.
Yep.
And when they don't make us happy, we say, then I'm going to look for it somewhere else. And I've read something years ago, I can't remember where, but I still refer back to it today. The goal of marriage is not your happiness. The goal of marriage is your holiness.
That's true.
The goal of marriage is to draw you closer to God. And so I take that to mean that marriage is one of the more sanctifying institutions that we have. In other words, what it makes you do if you let it, it makes you more like Christ. It makes you less selfish and more selfless.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to let it do that. If we're looking to it to make us happy, then we're going to be disappointed. If we're looking for God to bring us joy through the covenant relationship that He established, that's a whole nother ballgame.
If you are getting married and you are expecting your partner to make you happy, you are selfishly asking them to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, first off. Secondly, God does not put you with people that are perfect for you in the idea that like, oh, look, here's your partner on a silver platter and everything's going to be super easy moving forward. No, God puts you with people that are going to trigger you every single day. And the reasons why is that because He wants to bring that holiness out of you, every single time your partner triggers you, it's showing you what you need to fix and what you need to change and what you need to work on. So every time that anger bubbles up inside of you, you have to stop and ask, where's this coming from? What lesson do I need to learn out of this and what do I need to change and fix? That's one of the reasons that like my husband moving out isn't bothering me right now. I mean, yes, it bothers me, but like it's not like I'm not in a corner somewhere just absolutely decimated, because I know what I needed to work on. And I've spent the last 2 years doing that. Now, the thing about that is that going to your point of like, well, if I'm not happy here, I'll just move on. Guess what? Because of those attachment wounds that we talked about, you are going to like, there has to be polarity in your relationship, right? So like you can't have two alpha males going at it all the time. That's not going to work, right? And you can't have two people that are completely passive. Nothing's ever going to get done. So there has to be some polarity there. Well, fun fact, if you are a dismissive avoidant and you're going to be attracted to an anxious partner. Secure partners are never, I shouldn't say never, they're rarely attracted to people that are insecure. Those behaviors just aren't attractive to each other, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
So if you have an insecure attachment, which 80% of the world does, so 80% of the people walking around right now has an insecure attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Those insecure attachments, you're going to be attracted to the opposite partner than what you are, because there has to be that polarity. Well, if you leave, okay, great. It's not working out with this partner because we're arguing and we're fighting all the time and, we're triggering each other constantly. Yep. And also, when you move on and you go down the road and you're like, ooh, I really think this person, when you feel those butterflies in your stomach, that's actually your attachment wound saying, yay, more chemistry for me to be attracted to. And 5 years from now, you're going to look at that person and be like, holy cow, you are the exact same person as my ex with a different head.
Yep.
And here we are again because you didn't work through that. But once you both work through it, that's where your blissful marriage comes from. I told a couple yesterday, working through these attachment wounds and actually living into God's will for your marriage is planting seeds. Now, my dad was a farmer, is a farmer. So you don't plant and then harvest the next day. It's not that quick, right? You might spend the first 10 years of your marriage planting those seeds, tilling the ground, working through all the hardships, working through those childhood wounds. And then the last half of your marriage is when you really start to reap the rewards and enjoy that harvest. But nothing worthwhile ever comes easy. And that's what we're looking for, because society has given us these quick fixes and quick dopamine hits and we'll just move on to somebody else. That's what that is. We have no patience. We have no, those, again, going back to those fruits of the spirit, we have no self-control. Mm-hmm. We have no patience. We don't wait for anything. It's because we don't have to. Yeah. Well, I'll just find something different. I'll just move on.
We live in an instant culture.
Mm-hmm.
Hear me, brothers and sisters, marriage is not instant.
It is so not instant.
A good marriage is not instant. It takes time. It takes work. But here's what I know. With the help of the Lord and with the proper perspective and with coaches like you to help us work through some of those things we bring into the marriage, it can work. And it can work well.
It absolutely can.
It can work well.
It absolutely can.
Well, Kameran, this has been... Go ahead.
You can walk out into the street and just pick anybody random and be like, yep, I'm going to make it work with this one. And if you decide that it will work, it will work.
Yeah.
And if you decide it won't, it won't.
Yeah, I don't believe that there's one person for you. The whole fairy tale thing, you met your soulmate. I believe that, there are probably several people that you could make it work with, like you said. But it's about your mindset, about your attitude, and about how seriously you take it. And as you're entering into
to put in.
Yeah, that's right. Marriage takes work, guys, but hey, together we can do this thing. Kameran, how can my listeners learn more about you, the coaching you're doing, and get into your world?
Yeah, absolutely. Instagram, and I have a TikTok account. I don't really spend much time on there, but Instagram's pretty much where I hang out the most, and that is at married.and.connected. My website is recognizingpotential.com. My podcast is Married and Connected, and it goes out every Monday-ish, because, life. But yep, so pretty much weekly there, and it's the Married and Connected podcast, found anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever. And then I also have an email that I send out every Thursday with coaching that you can read in 7 minutes or less. And it's got quick tips for improving your marriage that way as well.
Awesome. I'll include all those links in the show notes. Kameran, It's been a blast. Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
The world needs coaches like you. And I appreciate you leaning in, appreciate you doing what lights you up and making a difference in this world in the area of marriages. Bless you, my friend. Good to have you on the show, and I wish nothing but the best for you moving forward.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.